Meghan's half-sister, Samantha Markle, who's made plenty of her own headlines in the lead-up to the royal wedding.
I do believe because there are no delivery certificates.
Lauren Goldman spoke exclusively with Samantha at her Florida home.
The tension surrounding Meghan Markle being a mother has reached an entirely new level. Since marrying Prince Harry, she has been tied to one scandal after another, each met with silence or overshadowed by an even bigger storm. But this time, the whispers refuse to fade. What was once speculation has now been fueled by her own sister, who claims to know something far darker. What did Samantha Markle reveal? And how could it shatter Meghan's already fragile public image? Join us as we explore Samantha Markle's revelation that has left Meghan stunned. A negative perception. When Meghan Markle married Prince Harry, the world celebrated what looked like the perfect fairy tale for a modern age. An American actress of biracial heritage joining one of the oldest royal families in the world seemed like a bold step toward progress. But as the cameras faded, Meghan soon found herself pulled into a storm of bias, media hostility, and institutional silence. Her presence within the monarchy did not just attract curiosity, it triggered a cultural collision that exposed fault lines of race, class, and gender hidden beneath the crown. From the beginning, Meghan's biracial identity made her story historic, but it also drew prejudice. Tabloids and voices online often laced their coverage with undertones that suggested she did not belong. Stereotypes painted her as manipulative or untrustworthy, and the comparisons to other royal women were far from fair. The public was not just invited to critique Meghan as an individual. They were encouraged to see her race as a challenge to tradition inside an overwhelmingly white institution. The British press played its part with relentless intensity. Meghan's every choice was spun into a negative headline. Cradling her baby bump became an act of vanity. Eating avocado toast was linked to environmental destruction. Decisions that won Kate Middleton glowing praise brought Meghan scorn and suspicion. The double standard was impossible to ignore. It was not just that she faced criticism, it was that she was judged more harshly, more personally.
Ashamed to say it at the time, and ashamed to have to admit it to Harry especially.
And more persistently than others around her. Over time, the narrative painted her less as a modern duchess and more as a disruption to royal life. Her background only fueled the fire. Meghan was American, divorced, and self-made. She did not come from aristocracy or British tradition, and that alone made her suspect in the eyes of some critics. Her independence, her directness, and her cultural background clashed with the quiet reserve of the royal establishment. What could have been celebrated as refreshing was instead framed as dangerous. To those who valued old traditions, she was not just different. She was an outsider who did not deserve her place. Gender bias added another layer to the storm. As a woman in a high-profile role, Meghan was dissected in ways male royals never were. Her appearance, her tone of voice, and even her ambition became weapons used against her. She was labeled difficult and demanding, terms often reserved for women who dare to step outside of expectations. The criticism did not fall evenly. It built upon the racial and cultural biases already in play, multiplying the sense that Meghan was somehow unfit for her royal role. What made it worse was the silence of the palace. While negative stories spread like wildfire, Meghan received little public defense. The institution, some argued, allowed her to take the brunt of the backlash to protect others. Critics pointed to William and Kate, noting how the palace shielded them while Meghan was left to weather the storm. Whether by design or by hesitation, she became a scapegoat. To the outside world, it looked like the monarchy had chosen its image over her well-being. When Meghan and Harry eventually stepped back from royal duties in 2020, the world gave their decision a name, Megxit. The word itself spoke volumes. It placed the weight of the departure squarely on her shoulders, turning a personal choice into a cultural joke. The shadow never faded. It only deepened with time. Was this the true cost of rewriting the royal script? And what fresh trials has she been forced to confront now? A fairy tale in smoke. Meghan Markle has been facing a relentless wave of trouble in recent months, and the pressure shows no sign of easing. What was once celebrated as a bold break from tradition has turned into a series of controversies that refuse to fade. From her strained ties with the royal family to ongoing family disputes that continue to spill into the public arena, Meghan finds herself surrounded by storms that threaten both her reputation and her carefully curated image. Much of the recent criticism circles back to her role as a mother. What should have been celebrated moments, the births of her children, the milestones of family life, have instead become the center of deep suspicion. The very events that should have cemented her legacy as a devoted mother have instead fueled questions about authenticity, leaving cracks in the story she wanted the world to believe. The allegations now run deeper than personal grievances. Meghan is accused not of bending the truth, but of manufacturing an entirely new persona.
It's not the rest of it doesn't matter, but the rest of it feels temporary.
An identity polished to perfection, but disconnected from reality. The whispers about her children, however extreme they may sound, continue to gain traction because they touch on the most fundamental aspects of her story, who she is and who she claims to be. At the heart of it all lies a crisis that cannot be easily dismissed as tabloid gossip. This is about credibility and the weight of expectations tied to both her role as a duchess and as a mother. Every unanswered question grows into speculation, and every delay in clarity only deepens the divide between those who defend her and those who demand answers. And just when it seemed the pressure from the outside world was enough, an even more personal storm erupted from within her own family. Shattered roots. If Meghan Markle thought her critics would eventually tire, her half-sister Samantha made sure that would never happen. Samantha didn't drift into the spotlight as a forgotten relative trying to cash in on fame. She stormed into it with fire, determined to dismantle the image Meghan had so carefully constructed. From her first words, the tone was set. It was about exposure. Samantha wasn't framing Meghan as a victim of press intrusion. She was painting herself as the architect of her own false empire. For years, whispers had circulated about Meghan's story, the outsider who climbed into royalty, the defiant duchess who turned tradition on its head. But Samantha sharpened those whispers into accusations, blunt and unforgiving. To her, Meghan's public life was a theater, a Hollywood script polished to perfection, wrapped in royal lace, and sold to the world as truth. When Meghan spoke about losing her father, the world sympathized. Yet Samantha hit back with an accusation that cut deep. Meghan hadn't lost their father. She had deliberately pushed him out. In Samantha's telling, this wasn't estrangement born of circumstance. It was erasure, a calculated decision to rewrite her own roots and bury the parts that didn't fit the polished image. Family became footnotes. Struggles were rewritten. Any detail that clashed with the Duchess's narrative was neatly edited out. The accusation reached its sharpest point when Samantha turned to motherhood, calling it the crown jewel of the deception. According to her, the story Meghan shared with the royal family, with Prince Harry, and with the public was riddled with inconsistencies. Samantha argued that the version Meghan presented simply couldn't align with reality. The births, the carefully staged announcements, the glowing photos, all of it in her eyes.
Each time a woman stands up for herself, without knowing it,
formed part of a broader performance designed to elevate Meghan beyond the woman she once was. This wasn't just a sister's bitterness spilling onto tabloid pages. Samantha positioned herself as the truth-teller, the one willing to shatter the glossy facade that had captivated millions. Every claim she made was designed to strike directly at Meghan's credibility, not her character alone. Samantha insisted that Meghan didn't rise gracefully into royalty, but engineered her ascent by crafting a version of herself that the palace and the public would accept. And so, the narrative fractured into two irreconcilable paths. On one side stood Meghan, whose defenders saw her as a woman who had endured cruelty from both press and family, unfairly targeted for daring to rewrite her destiny. On the other stood Samantha, declaring that the Duchess had rewritten not destiny but reality itself, building a costume so convincing it fooled the world. But could this storm of accusations truly end with Samantha? Or was there another twist waiting in the shadows? And if so, would it expose Meghan further or finally silence her critics? The surrogate's shadow. Just when it seemed Samantha Markle's accusations had reached their peak, the story took a darker, more explosive turn. Out of the shadows stepped a woman known only as DL, and she didn't arrive with vague stories or bitter opinions. She came armed with evidence, hospital bills, medical records, and whispers of a tightly binding non-disclosure agreement. Her claim was staggering. She insisted she was the real surrogate behind Meghan Markle's royal pregnancies. According to DL, the glamorous baby bump strolls that captivated the world were nothing more than a performance. While Meghan posed for glowing photos in designer coats, curating picture-perfect moments for magazines and social media, DL claimed she was the one carrying the actual royal heirs. Her story described long months of isolation, silenced by promises of privacy and fair compensation that she says later twisted into betrayal. For DL, the royal fairy tale wasn't an uplifting story. It was a cover-up so polished it erased her completely from history. The contrast between image and reality, as DL presented it, was damning. While cameras flashed on Meghan gently cradling her belly, DL claimed the truth was hidden away in quiet clinics and private homes. It was a performance for the world's eyes, an illusion designed to protect the royal image. If her words hold weight, then Meghan's defiance of royal tradition wasn't simply rebellion.
There were just...
It was the deliberate use of illusion, turning motherhood into her most elaborate costume yet. At first, the claim sounded like just another tabloid tale, sensational, unbelievable, the kind of story that gossip feeds on. But then came the details. DL spoke not in vague riddles but in vivid accounts. Recruitment meetings in California, contracts signed in discreet back rooms, months of confinement that felt less like a nurturing pregnancy and more like imprisonment inside a royal vault. Her version of events was too specific to dismiss. She described the loneliness of carrying children who would never bear her name, the silence imposed by powerful agreements, and the bitterness of being erased from the story she had lived. Her words painted a picture of emotional devastation, where joy was replaced with secrecy, and where the miracle of life was overshadowed by betrayal. Then came the accounts of postpartum struggles, complications left untreated, medical bills piling up, and the crushing weight of being denied acknowledgement. According to DL, she wasn't just cut out of the story. She was left to carry the consequences alone while the palace and Meghan presented a flawless narrative to the world.
In celebrating the 125th anniversary of women's suffrage in your country.
What had begun as whispers of inconsistency now threatened to become something far more toxic. DL's story blurred the line between rumor and revelation, planting a seed of doubt that would be difficult to uproot. If even fragments of her account are proven true, it doesn't just challenge Meghan's personal credibility. It strikes at the very foundation of the royal image she worked so hard to create. And that is where gossip transforms into something far more poisonous, something that could leave scars on a legacy already in crisis. But how much of this was truth? And how much was manipulation? And in a story already clouded by accusations, could the line between victim and villain ever be drawn clearly? Illusions of motherhood. Meghan Markle's speeches about empowerment, sisterhood, and lifting women up suddenly feels different when set against DL's claims. To critics, the contrast is jarring. DL doesn't describe a duchess rewriting the rules of royalty. She describes a woman burying another under the weight of a gag order. If DL's story is even partially true, Meghan wasn't embodying empowerment at all. She was exploiting it. For years, skeptics called Meghan the actress-turned-duchess, accusing her of playing roles crafted for cameras. But DL's testimony takes it further, suggesting that Meghan wasn't just playing the part of royal rebel. She was playing the most sacred role of all, motherhood. And once DL's words entered the conversation, dismissing them as mere conspiracy became harder. The silence from Meghan and Harry only deepened the suspicion. With accusations this explosive, one would expect swift rebuttals, denials, legal action, even a simple DNA test that could end speculation in an instant. Instead, the response was chilling. Nothing. No explanation, no transparency.
It happened a few weeks ago, earlier this month, here at our cottage.
Not even the softest statement to calm the storm. In the court of public opinion, silence doesn't read as dignity. It reads as guilt. Every day they refused to respond. The narrative shifted further against them. Critics replayed footage of Meghan in maternity wear, scrutinizing the infamous moment where her abdomen appeared to sway unnaturally beneath a patterned dress. For doubters, the footage wasn't just awkward, it was proof. Meanwhile, DL raised the stakes. She publicly offered to testify under oath, to provide medical records, even to submit to DNA testing. Her confidence gave her story weight, pulling it out of the realm of online chatter and into something resembling sworn testimony. In contrast, the Duke and Duchess's refusal to engage appeared calculated. To their detractors, the logic was simple. If there's nothing to hide, why leave the world guessing? Even Prince Harry, once adored as the palace rebel, now looked compromised. Was he a willing participant in a deception? Or had he been swept into the illusion like the rest of the world? The silence made him look complicit, whether knowingly or not. And in some ways, that was the cruelest irony of all. The couple who built their empire on the mantra of speaking their truth suddenly had no truth to share. Their voices weren't silenced by the palace or blocked by tabloids. They simply chose not to speak. And in doing so, they handed their critics a devastating narrative. That silence wasn't strategy, it was a confession. For supporters, Meghan and Harry's refusal to dignify gossip with a response was a show of restraint. But for skeptics, that very restraint was the loudest alarm bell yet. It wasn't just about scandal anymore. It was about trust, about whether the image of modern royalty they had worked so hard to build was nothing more than another stage performance. And the longer the silence stretched, the more poisonous the doubts became. If silence can protect a legacy, can it also destroy one? And when the stakes involve not just reputations but the very traditions of monarchy, how long before the past demands to be compared with the present? Broken traditions, fractured trust. Royal births have always been more than private family moments. They are public milestones. Traditions polished by centuries of openness. Diana stood outside St. Mary's Hospital just hours after giving birth, tired but glowing, baby in her arms, showing the world there was no mystery. Kate did the same, stepping into history with 3 picture-perfect appearances. But Meghan? She rewrote the script. No hospital steps, no clear press briefings, not even confirmation of where the birth took place. A royal physician was barred from examining her womb, and when the pictures came, the timelines didn't match. The now infamous folding belly clip still haunts the internet like a ghost that refuses to fade. Critics began to argue Meghan didn't embrace tradition. She staged it. Instead of royal transparency, it looked like a Hollywood production, complete with props and precise camera angles. For monarchy watchers, this wasn't just another modern twist. It was a broken pattern, and in royal history, broken patterns fuel suspicion. What Meghan and Harry called privacy appeared to many as deliberate evasion. Each skipped tradition poured fuel onto the conspiracy theories already burning, because beneath the glamour, one chilling question kept echoing. Why did Meghan's royal motherhood look so different from every royal mother before her? This is where whispers begin to stretch beyond tabloid gossip and creep into a constitutional crisis. If DL's claims hold any weight, the issue isn't only who carried the children, but whether those children legally fit into the centuries-old rules of succession. Royal legitimacy has always demanded proof, not PR spin. Heirs are expected to be born from the royal womb, witnessed and documented beyond dispute. But Meghan's pregnancies seemed locked behind secrecy, NDAS, and timelines that faded into smoke.
And he was like, you had his bad ear. He couldn't hear anything you were saying. I was like, oh. Well, I thought it went really well.
If surrogacy played a role and was never disclosed, critics argue it risks destabilizing the very foundation of the monarchy. Suddenly, the future of the crown feels tied to a silence too heavy to ignore. And when silence is heavier than truth, does it become its own kind of answer? Or worse, does it become the verdict history will remember? Silence as a verdict. Imagine two children at the center of a storm they never asked for, not because of who they are, but because of what may have been hidden about how they arrived. The monarchy doesn't deal in half-truths. It deals in absolutes. Either Archie and Lilibet were born in line with royal protocol, or the entire narrative risks collapse under the weight of deception. That's why this no longer feels like family drama. It's a potential crisis that threatens the very institution Meghan once claimed she was modernizing. When most people are cornered, they clear their names. Meghan and Harry? They called their lawyers. Reports suggest that as soon as DL's claims began spreading, the Sussex legal machine roared into action, firing off threats to media outlets. But while the threats flew, one thing never came: denial. Not once did Meghan or Harry simply say, "This is false. Here's the proof." Instead,
so excited and pleased and happy, and I think people looked at it and went, wow, what a breath of fresh air.
they leaned on intimidation, not evidence. And the irony is striking. This is the couple who built an empire on their truth. Oprah interviews, Netflix deals, and endless speeches about authenticity. Yet, when faced with the simplest challenge, disproving the surrogate story, they chose silence backed by legal warnings. To critics, that looked less like confidence and more like fear. PR experts ripped the strategy apart. Lawyers can muzzle headlines, but they can't stop whispers. And in scandals like this, silence only amplifies suspicion. The lack of denial turned DL's story from rumor into something that felt like a suppressed reality. In fact, some went as far as calling it a cover-up, accusing not only Meghan and Harry but Buckingham Palace itself of lying about Archie's birth. As the silence dragged on, the damage showed. Polls began to tilt, with more people believing DL's version over Meghan's polished narrative. Suddenly, the Sussex brand, built on glossy interviews and staged PR moments, looked fragile, like a house of cards swaying in a storm. Oprah's Sit Down, the Netflix series, and the empowerment speeches were all replayed under a darker lens, no longer inspiring, but performative. Behind palace gates and Hollywood mansions, whispers grew louder. Meghan and Harry weren't just battling the press anymore. They were losing the public. Insiders spoke of growing strain, portraying them less as a couple and more as business partners struggling to hold together a crumbling empire. Meanwhile, Samantha Markle sharpened the blade, framing the entire scandal not as karma, but as exposure. The collapse of what she claimed was a royal illusion. And so, silence became its own confession. DL's claims detonated, and every non-response from Meghan and Harry only made them louder. What began as whispers of family drama snowballed into a constitutional question, a PR disaster, and a credibility crisis no Netflix series could polish away. The Duchess once marketed herself as a symbol of resilience and reinvention, but now every unanswered question tilts her story further from inspiration toward illusion.
So I wore a lot of muted tones, but it also was so I could just blend in.
And here lies the bitter truth. This isn't the first time Meghan's carefully crafted story has begun to unravel. But if the silence continues, how long before doubt becomes the accepted truth? And when it does, will Meghan and Harry's story be remembered as a fight for freedom or as the greatest illusion in modern royal history? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.